Hello viewers and a very warm welcome. You're watching India Fights Back with your host Kriti Mishra. In a widely observed trend, Indians are now self-prescribing and popping medicines which are generally given to COVID-19 patients in hospital settings immediately after testing positive or showing symptoms of coronavirus infection. According to the doctors at prominent hospitals, these patients land up in hospitals in later stages and confess to consuming popular or known COVID drugs to prevent severe disease. WHO does not recommend self-medication with any medicine, including antibiotics, as a prevention or cure for COVID-19. Right drug at the right time, in the right measure, holds the key in the treatment of COVID-19, and every effort should be made to discourage self-medication and prevent unnecessary panic buying of drugs. Why self-medication is a big no? Let's find out from our experts. Joining us on the program today, Dr. Meenu Bajpai, Professor, Transfusion Medicine, Institute of Liver and Biliary Sciences, New Delhi, and Dr. Anil Gurto, Director Professor and Head Department of Medicine, Lady Hardinge Medical College. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, both of you.
Welcome.
And Dr. Bajpai, coming to you first, we need to emphasize that no two patients are alike and symptom progression cannot be alike, though it may be similar, and that starting medicines without a physician's advice may sometimes give the patient a false sense of security, and the key phases of illnesses may be missed. Your opening comments.
With the WhatsApp University and so much information available today across all social media platforms, it has become a very disturbing trend that patients try to self-medicate. The important thing over here is what needs to be done is often not done. There are certain simple measures that need to be taken for a patient. They are not taken, but they want to go ahead and take medications. I would like to start with the very common medications over here. You get fever, you take paracetamol, well and good. It is prescribed and you can take it as an over-the-counter drug for fever. Beyond that, if you're getting cough, you take a cough syrup. That is also fine. But beyond that, if you're talking of antibiotics are not antivirals. COVID-19 is a viral disease. So if you're taking antibiotics, it is serving no purpose, and all antibiotics are going to have some side effects. So antibiotic has to be taken only when you're suspecting a secondary bacterial infection. Okay, then you come to steroids. Steroids downgrade the immunity. If taken in the early phase of a viral infection, they will rather be detrimental. They will basically help the virus to multiply at a faster rate rather than stopping it. So steroids are only prescribed in hospital settings at a later stage, where you're thinking of muting the immune response, when the immune response is causing damage to the body. So that again over there. So for every drug, you have to be very clear why we are giving that drug. Giving the self-medicating, the biggest problem with self-medicating is you do not know what outcome you're expecting from that medication, because only a doctor can prescribe these things, these medicines. So it has to be very clear at what phase of disease, what kind of medications need to be given.
Absolutely. Dr. Gurto, the internet is rife with suggestions and recommendations that are sometimes helpful, but most are borderline dangerous. What is your take, sir, and what is your suggestion to the people?
Internet or these social platforms are neutral platforms. It depends on what use and what value you put them to, whether they become your saviors or destroyers. That depends on us. Now, the basic question is, we are talking about self-prescribing behaviors. Self-prescribing behaviors did not arise today or yesterday. There's a long history behind them, because self-prescribing, where does it come from? It comes from my belief systems. I believe that this is what I have and this is what I need, and therefore, that is a belief system embedded in me. Now, I'm not talking of doctors. We are doctors. Our belief systems are framed and shaped by internal medicine, the biology and physiology of medicine, human body. But let us talk of an ordinary man who is not acquainted with medical sciences. They are the ones whose belief systems lead them to behaviors, and one of the behavior we call by the term self-prescribing behavior. It's a behavior. that emanates, flows from a belief. Now, where does this belief come from? This belief comes from culture, local cultures, and these cultures have histories. And in North India, a culture that is rampant is, if you have fever, use antibiotics.
Yes.
Now, this didn't come up today because of COVID. It antedates COVID, and it has been amplified by the newer social platforms. Now, on these social platforms, through these social platforms are generated scripts. If this, do that. If that, do this. One script that has become a meme, which is diffusing culturally as a meme, one to other to the next, through the amplifying effect of the networks, is that if you have COVID, take hydroxychloroquine, take ivermectin, take favipiravir, take doxycycline, take azithromycin, and if you're not getting okay, I might as well ask for steroids. Until here, we do it ourselves. As a non-medico, I do it. I go and get it. I start azithro, I start doxy, I start favipiravir, I start hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, and all of these I start in one go. Where did this come from? This came from a belief. Where did this belief come from? It came from a meme, which is circulating a script, preformed scripts through the various social platforms, WhatsApps and like. So this is where the problem lies, and has got amplified by two things. One, there is no specific treatment for COVID virus. There is none until now. Only three things help: oxygen through the appropriate platform of delivery, steroids, and anticoagulants taken at the right time, as you said, by the right person through the right doctor.
Yeah.
And the rest, everything is in the realm of belief. It's a belief. You believe it, it's God. If you don't believe it, it's nothing. So these are circulating, amplified by the social network effects, and they're coming to me, they're going to you, they're going everywhere. And on that assumption and beliefs, we are self-prescribing, and that is a behavior. That's it.
Absolutely, sir. And you also talked about oxygen. Dr. Bajpai, a lot of people are looking for oxygen as well, storing it, whether they have the disease or they don't.
That is preposterous, I would say, because it's not going to help. If you're getting a normal oxygen saturation above 94% on normal room air, you don't need oxygen. And when you're going to need oxygen, that's going to be somewhere below 94% of oxygen saturation when you have. And that is the time when you'll start talking about hospital and supplemental oxygen. And before that, having proper breathing techniques, prone ventilation, all these may help you to improve your oxygenation. So that again is, it's not going to help. The patients who need it won't get it. And those who don't need it, storing them. It is not going to improve. Beyond a certain level, it's not going to improve your oxygen saturation. If you're going to have oxygen at home, a cylinder at home, it's not going to work. You should, it's properly judged on who requires oxygen, who doesn't, and it's a doctor who prescribes that this person would be needing oxygen or not needing oxygen.
Absolutely. It's the doctor who's going to prescribe. And Dr. Gurtu, before coming for this show, I was making my notes, and there I came across this Google trend where the data showed that searches for the phrase "how to make oxygen at home." Now, there is a scientifically proven method to produce medical oxygen through concentrators. Any other means to try, and making the gas at home involves many risks, like chances of toxic gases being inhaled and explosions as well. How do we drive home that point, sir?
To drive home that point, again, we have to use the social media through a specially directed purpose, through which we have to address two facts. Oxygen that we get normally, like I, me, you, all of us are getting right now, is from air. This has only 21% oxygen. 78%, the remaining, the majority, is not oxygen, it's nitrogen and argon. But this 21% oxygen in normal natural air is sufficient for a healthy person with healthy lungs, like we are. Someone who has an unhealthy lungs, this is insufficient. So we have to scale it up, concentrate it beyond 21%, maybe beginning with 24% and thereafter. This process can only be carried out by two mechanisms. One, what is called pressure adsorption. Here, these are the oxygen concentrators. What we do is we make use of the fact that air is abundant and unrestricted. So a compressor machine sucks in the natural air into the compressor, compresses it, and makes it flow through a sieve. Now that sieve is seeded with, it's coated with a very special precious metal called zeolite. Yeah. Zeolite has a very unique property of absorbing nitrogen, which is 78% of the air, and leaving the rest of the 21% oxygen to get through into the next chamber where it gets concentrated by repeated cyclings. So this is the technology of oxygen concentrator, where we make high-grade oxygen up to 90 to 93% concentrated using plain air. It can be replenished, but there is an oxygen concentrator machine, 5 liters, 15 liters, and you have it, and higher orders. The other is the industrial use, where we basically use fractional distillation. We basically draw in air and make use of the fact that oxygen, which is 21%, and nitrogen, which is 78%, have different melting and boiling points. Oxygen, it's minus 182 degrees Celsius. That cold, it boils at that cold. And nitrogen is a bit lower, 190 something, minus 192 degrees Celsius. So using this, when we make them into liquid, both of them, cool them, and then expand them, they boil at two different temperatures. First, nitrogen, because it boils at a lower temperature of minus 192, followed by oxygen. And we making use that they come one after the other as they boil out. We fractionate them into two separate chambers. Nitrogen goes to the industry, oxygen goes to industry or to the medical use. So these are the only two ways we human beings still today can make oxygen. The third is electrolysis of water, which is not traditional, as yet a developed technology. If there is any third, it's dangerous, it's irrational, it won't work. And both these are industrial processes. Right. Though they can be used at home, oxygen concentrators, but they have to be manufactured and tested and standardized in appropriate industries. And then we can use them at home under supervision. That's it. Absolutely. So it is irrational and it is dangerous. But there's another important point. Dr. Bajpai, self-prescription could also be very dangerous to our liver as well.
That is a very important point. Remdesivir, which is a very common drug being used around these days, has a definitive liver toxicity, and patients who have deranged liver function tests cannot be prescribed remdesivir. And those who do take remdesivir, we get a lot of cases where their liver function tests become abnormal post taking this drug. So it's very important to take it on prescription under proper monitoring in hospital conditions. Remdesivir is not a drug which is to be taken at home. That is very important to consider. Again, I would like to reiterate, what you have to do at home, that people are not doing. And those are very simple things. They are like, you should, every 4 hours, you should check your temperature, your pulse, your oxygen saturation. You should also note down how you're feeling. Are you feeling improved? Are you feeling less well than before? Are you having more labored breathing, or your breathing is easing out? These are the things. If you make a proper chart and you keep on monitoring these things, take paracetamol, take adequate fluids, that's going to help you. Taking these drugs, unprescribed drugs, is only going to cause harm. The simple measures which have to be taken.
Yes, ma'am, that's only going to cause harm. And I'd also like to take Dr. Gotu's view on this. So with the second COVID wave, in India, the paranoia over catching severe disease is leading people to try these drugs. There has been scramble for remdesivir and other few drugs, which has led to shortages, panic buying, and even black marketing.
So it's amplification of fear. And when we have fear as a primary and predominant emotion in us, what does one do when one is under fear? We do whatever it takes. And two, we get a tunnel vision. We only see that which is in front. And what is that in front is placed before us by the social media scripts that which I referred to earlier, the memes circulating through these things. So these are acting like echo chambers. The same meme or the same script, if not, well, take remdesivir. If not, take high-dose steroids. If not, go for tocilizumab or whatever. All useless drugs, unless a very small subset of patients may benefit from remdesivir, and that is also, it doesn't really save you from death or ventilator. If you are destined by a biology to go on to ventilator or to die, you will still die or go on to ventilator, remdesivir or no remdesivir. It just shortens the duration on the bed in the hospital by 5 days. That too, according to one trial. Other trials have not even demonstrated that benefit. So we run after this. Why? Because it's the fear that is the key driver. And fear makes us panicky, and panic reduces the whole large picture vision, where I weigh the balance of benefits and risks in a more objective way by consulting other objective sources, including doctors and medical systems. I just form a tunnel vision, and through the barrel of the gun, I go for what matters and what my WhatsApp shows me. It could be remdesivir. So it's remdesivir, 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 and panic amplifies and it surges into a storm. And that is leading to mass black marketing, even the routine drugs like steroids and basic anti-febrile fever drugs disappearing from the market because of hoarding, stocking. If I get, then what? If I get that, so what? Let me. And that kind of a thing is amplifying. It's irrational, but it's understandable if you relate it to the belief systems and how they're spreading through the networks of social media. And of course, that's not to say that social media is bad. It is certainly not. It's how we use it, what value we attach to it. That's all that makes a difference. And that's where we have to focus.
Absolutely. Dr. Bajpai, so there are two fights. One, of course, we have to fight this virus, and the other one, we have to fight this misinformation on social media platforms and, of course, on our WhatsApp.
It's very important. We have talked about the medication. There's another aspect I would like to bring to light, and that is the investigations. People get a lot of investigations done. Now, they want CT scans. The moment they become positive, we need a CT scan. The doctor is not prescribing. It is not indicated for a mild disease. You're not even having breathlessness, but you want a CT score. And you might get a score of 2 or 3 or 3 or 4. It's not going to make any difference because on the clinical picture. So what happens is that when you're taking these multiple CT scans, you're exposing your body to a high dose of radiation. That is to be avoided. A CT scan is to be done in a sick patient where there is an indication where the doctor is prescribing it. Again, for investigations, you want to get a C-reactive protein done, D-dimer done, and a multiple of other tests. Some even want interleukin-6 and other tests. In mild disease, they are not indicated. You're spending a lot of money, giving a blood sample, getting the reports, which will make no difference to your recovery, to the disease process. It's not going to make any difference. So it is very important to understand as far as self-medication and as far as self-investigation. Let the doctor decide if you need an investigation, especially investigations such as CT scan, where you also have a long-term risk of getting cancer if you're getting highly exposed to this kind of investigations.
Absolutely. And Dr. Gurtu, a lot of people are also searching about biomarker tests.
Biomarker tests are again another manifestation of the same problem, what Dr. Meenu Bajpai just referred to, the CT scan problem in the diagnostics. We don't treat biomarkers. We treat the whole patient and that patient's disease. That is the clinical status. So if you chase and treat biomarkers, you're heading for a bad to a worse and a worsening situation. So we never treat biomarkers. That's a basic dictum in medicine as of today. We treat the patient. So if the symptoms are mild, as Dr. Meenu just said, the oxygen saturation is above 93%. There is no need to get any special tests other than the routine tests. No need for CTs and any biomarkers except the routine tests which the doctor will tell you. Biomarkers and all enter into the picture, which is moderate, less than 93%. And not only that, even moderates are not required for all these things. And worsening despite oxygen and steroids, it is still worsening, then and only then we begin to think, shall we get a biomarker test done or even a first CT scan done? Otherwise, CT will show something. Almost 50% of mild patients will show positive CTs. What does it mean? That information is meaningless. It doesn't mean that you will have a severe disease or you will die or you will go on a ventilator. No, it doesn't mean anything. A mild to early moderate disease will have all biomarkers, IL-6 and all in thousands, because IL-6, if you keep the vial outside on the table for a few hours, it'll go into thousands. It's a very temperature sensitive enzyme, IL-6, cytokine. So there are so many false issues. We don't recommend any test other than the routine, the complete blood counts and liver functions and KFTs, the ones that you do in any fever, until and unless it's moderate and worsening, or your doctor feels for some other special clinical situations that they ought to be done. Otherwise, it's best to stay away from CT scans, any biomarkers, if you are stable, even if you're moderate and not worsening, even then. Yeah.
And Dr. Gurtu, the side effects of using steroids.
Oh, yeah. Steroids have, they amplify, they are metabolic, they work on your metabolism and even on your genome, genetics. So they amplify and derange virtually every metabolic pathway in your body, beginning with, as Dr. Meenu just said, suppressed immunity. So I may survive the virus, COVID virus, but I will get a secondary bacterial infection and sepsis. It's happening. Why? Because before I came to the hospital, I self-medicated on high doses of steroids, high doses, which by the time I recovered from my virus, I fell to the bacteria. And why did I fall to that? Because the steroid-induced excessive dose and inappropriate use of steroids caused immunosuppression. 1. 2, sugars. They just make your sugars go haywire. An ordinary person, mild diabetic, takes steroids on his own at home, unmonitored, unprescribed. What happens? Next day, sugars go into 300s, 400 mg%, close to crisis. These are happening, and these patients are coming to us with such problems. And then there are myriad other this thing, but up to 2 weeks. That's why all steroid prescriptions standard for COVID are between 5 and 7 days, not longer. Longer than that would require a very special judicious evaluation by a clinician well versed in treating COVID. Otherwise, it's 5 to 7 days on a regular dose prescribed by a doctor. Yeah.
But Dr. Bajpai, the moot question, of course, remains: how should people first compose themselves before dashing off to buy medicines or blocking beds?
When you're in a panic situation, as Dr. Gurtu said, you have to keep your brain in place, common sense in place, that it is an infection in which 85% of the people are going to recover without any hospitalization or anything. So you're lucky, most of the people are going to be lucky and going to be in the 85%. And over there, they just need to take fluids. If they get fever, they need to take paracetamol and proper nutrition. That's all. And they have to be, the most important thing is being vigilant, being very aware that you do not need self-medication, but at the same time being very aware that you have to monitor the situation. As I had earlier reiterated, temperature, oxygen saturation, pulse, labored breathing, if you're getting increasing difficulty in breathing. So these are the things you have to look for when anything is worsening. It is very important to be in connection with a medical practitioner, a registered medical practitioner, that is a doctor. Be in connect. Keep talking about your symptoms. And if you're having a persistent high fever beyond 5 days, if you're having increasing difficulty in breathing, chest pain, or pressure, feeling of pressure in the chest, mental confusion, or an inability to get aroused, if these kind of symptoms are occurring, it is definitely time to go to the hospital and get a better kind of care. But most of the cases are going to recover without going into this. So a proper monitoring, proper fluid, over-the-counter paracetamol, and food intake. It's going to be enough for most of the patients. It is very important to have this kind of sense that most people are going to get better with this.
All right, time for closing comments from both our guests. Dr. Gurtu, What is your message to the people saying there should be no self-medication and people must rely on experts' advice?
Look before you jump. So don't jump into doing anything on your own. Look, take a broad picture. What are the benefits? What are the risks? Consult your doctor. Do accordingly. That's
all
it.
Right, Dr. Bajpai. Dr. Guru, look before you jump, or rather don't jump at all.
I'm giving a humorous message. My message is doctors learn medicine for n number of years. It is one of the longest courses in, I think, any kind of science. So it takes that much time to get that kind of experience. We can't get it from Facebook or social media. Believe in your doctor and follow the instructions.
All right, I just have to take another comment from Dr. Gurtu. Dr. Gurtu, it can't come from the Facebook or social media or WhatsApp.
It can. However, we have to be very clear how we approach it. We should not denigrate or attack directly the false or irrational scripts on social media, because the more you attack them, the more legitimacy they gain. So you place your counter narrative, one, and two, as I said, we have to send this message, look before you jump, not because if you slip, you just fall one step and so what? No, the danger is that if you slip and fall the first step, you will also likely to go down, falling the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, until you land and break your bones. That is the risk. So counter narratives without attacking or denigrating what is there, because if you attack, they gain more legitimacy. That's standard psychology, public psychology. Your own narrative, rational, and backed up by some emotion. The emotional messaging also has to balance the reasoning, because without emotion, it doesn't sink in our belief systems. So we have to generate counter belief systems, I believe. Yeah.
All right, so let's be rational. On that note, thank you so much for joining us. So that's all we had for you in this edition of India Fights Back. But before that, let me remind you once again to stay safe from the coronavirus pandemic. Remember to wear a face mask and wash your hands and face regularly, and ensure that you maintain physical distancing whenever you're stepping outside. These simple precautions are all it takes to defeat this pandemic. Take care and good